Did you know that in the 19th century it was widely believed that the other planets in our solar system were likely inhabited? At the same time, the quality of telescopes was rapidly increasing, making it possible for astronomers to see and sketch the incredible details of the geography of Mars. As we'll see, the initial excitement fades as science begins to cast doubt on the possibility of life on our planetary neighbor. As astronomers charted the features of the red planet, many believed they were seeing oceans that confirmed ideas about the likelihood of life on Mars. Later, observations of canals and apparent straight lines on the surface of Mars seemed to offer evidence of intelligent life and civilizations on the planet. We now know that there is no intelligent life on Mars, but understanding the history of the arguments around that possibility offers insight into how the evidence and authority work in scientific reasoning and argumentation. Mars was presumed to be inhabited. In an 1831 astronomy textbook, the young astronomer explained, "To the people who live on Mars, this Earth probably appears larger than Mars does to us," and I quote. This was not simply a colorful turn of phrase. In the 1830s, many astronomers believed Mars, the other planets, and even the Sun were inhabited. Our image of Mars developed along with advancements in the quality of our instruments to study it. As the picture came into focus, similar between Mars and Earth, and in particular the belief that dark portions of the planet were oceans, led many to speculate about the possibility of life on the planet. Even more fascinating, in 1838, astronomer Thomas Dix suggested that there is land and water analogs to those on our globe, and further that, from the size of the dark spots, about 1/3 or 1/4 of the surface of that planet is covered with water. Based on this evidence, he suggests that respecting the physical and moral state of the beings that inhabit it, we might be apt to conclude that they're in a condition not altogether very different from that of inhabitants of our globe, referring to Earth. Much of this work was grounded in the notion of teleology, that everything in nature serves a purpose and a divine design. If the planets were places like Earth, this line of reasoning suggested that a creator would have put life there like he did here. By the 1860s, the idea of life on other worlds had become particularly popular in the works of French author and astronomer Camille Flammarion. His book brought considerable attention to the idea. His ideas about life on Mars also made their way into his popular astronomy books. Throughout these works, Flammarion devotes considerable discussion to the amount of water and ice on Mars. Between these books, how early maps of Mars were drawn, and various interpretations of the light coming off the planet, many scientists and astronomers believe that Mars had oceans or seas. The decisions that go into how to draw a map confer considerable authority onto the ideas presented in the map. When astronomer and popular author Richard Proctor presented a map of Mars illustrating its oceans and continents, he wanted readers to think of Earth's continents and oceans. Looking at a map like this suggests to a reader that the oceans of Mars are a fact. Presentations of the geography of Mars made it seem all the more likely that it was an inhabited world just like ours. Alongside the arguments embedded in how Mars was mapped came arguments for Martian oceans tied to studies of the light reflected off the planet. Maps of Martian oceans were not just based on telescope observations, but one of the key arguments for oceans on Mars came from the developing technique of spectroscopy. In 1859, Gustav Kirchhoff and Robert Bunsen had made significant advances in studying dark spots in the spectrum of light that came off burning different chemicals. This work led to the ability to read the light spectrum coming from objects in the heavens as kind of a chemical fingerprint, identifying the makeup of objects in space. Spectroscopy played an important role in our understanding of the composition of the heavens. Kirchhoff and Bunsen discovered that every element has a different signature of dark lines. The fact that one could study light coming from an object to understand what it was made of was very powerful for astronomy. It made possible something that many thought we would never know: the physical composition of objects in the heavens. Elias Colbert, assistant director of the Dearborn Observatory, explained that examination of the light spectrum from Mars indicated that there was a considerable amount of water on the planet. As a result, he suggests, Mars is therefore adapted as a residence for rational beings like ourselves, and on the basis of teleology, that the Martians had likely attained to a higher state of mental development than we have. In contrast to existing maps like the Dawes map we mentioned earlier, an Italian astronomer named Schiaparelli made a map in 1877 which showed a network of hard-edged, straight lines crisscrossing the planet. Other astronomers could not produce such precise-looking maps. With that look of precision came a form of authority. Without photographs, these kind of drawings were a powerful form of evidence. While some astronomers argued Schiaparelli's observations were in error, many concurred. Schiaparelli allegedly had higher quality of instruments, and he asserted that his location was particularly well suited for observing Mars. In 1886, several astronomers confirmed Schiaparelli's studies of Mars, and interpreting these canals became an important issue. Unlike the oceans, the canals seem to suggest clear evidence of the work of extraterrestrials on the landscape of Mars, where the oceans of Mars had suggested the possibility of life on the planet. The canals seem to offer hard evidence of intelligent life on the red planet. Nonetheless, skeptics remained. For example, in 1892, astronomer George Davidson of the Lick Observatory reportedly told the San Francisco Call, "Mars inhabited? Nonsense." Do you know that every true astronomer has been very sorry to see all this haberdash that some of the newspapers have been printing about Mars being inhabited and are seeing canals on the surface and all that other rot and nonsense? Percival Lowell was now the face of Mars. His face appeared prominently in a range of full-page illustrated stories about life on Mars. While there had been stories about the possibility of life on Mars in American newspapers before Lowell, they hadn't been nearly this dramatic and extensive. By this time, scientific opinion was already turning against belief in intelligent life on Mars, but the public was excited to hear these stories. One of Lowell's central arguments was that the structure of the canals he and the other astronomers had seen on Mars was such that it clearly meant that they were something that only intelligent life forms could produce. In comparing natural lines like cracks in the mud, cracks on the earth, and even cracks on the moon to artificial lines like streets on the roads, railroads, irrigation canals, he claimed that the Martian canals, becoming an increasingly complex network of interconnected lines on his maps of the planet, clearly illustrated that Mars was a world inhabited by intelligent beings. However, by 1903, many astronomers had turned against the idea of the canals. These astronomers, still unable to observe the canals themselves, suggested that they were optical illusions. But Lowell's images of the planet remained powerful and iconic representations. What may be shocking is that many Americans, like Alexander Graham Bell, found Lowell's line of reasoning and his vivid visual presentations of evidence convincing. In 1909, Bell wrote an 8-page letter to his wife about the matter. After reviewing Lowell's arguments, he suggests there is no escape from the conviction that Mars is inhabited by a highly civilized and intelligent race of beings carrying on a process of agriculture and wringing subsistence. Lowell's arguments carried considerable weight and advanced the idea of intelligent life on Mars even further into the public imagination. In 1907, Lowell invested a sizable sum of money in taking photographs of the Martian canals. In his opinion, these images removed all doubt about the existence of canals on Mars. However, by opening up this interpretation of the observations behind the various maps of the planet, the images ended up contributing to a loss of credibility in his work. The precise-looking maps, like the one from the Schiaparelli, carried a kind of weight, clarity, and authority in justifying the ideas of canals on Mars. But with the photography came a new presentation, which made the seemingly objective maps of the previous era look deeply subjective. While the canals appeared obvious to Schiaparelli and Lowell, the photographs were not convincing to others. As evidence-mounted public option began to sway, although the possibility of extraterrestrial life still captivated the imagination of many. After 1907, astronomers largely became convinced that there were no canals on Mars. Instead of this being a real feature of Mars that needed to be explained, it became broadly accepted that the canals were instead some kind of optical illusion. Still, debate continued about interpretations of the canals, including an argument from Carl Sagan and Jim Pollack that they could be the result of shifting dust on the planet's surface. Discussion was eventually completely settled when NASA's Marina 4 photographed the planet and found that there were no canals at all. There was not even something that could be misinterpreted as canals. On closer observation, the canals of Mars had been an optical illusion all along. In hindsight, this story suggests the importance of skeptics in the face of bold claims and generally assumed ideas. Further, it suggests the important role that personal beliefs and ideas can play in gathering and interpreting data. While it was broadly believed that there was intelligent life across the solar system in the beginning of the 19th century, by the middle of the 20th, the idea had become untenable.